You have felt it, haven't you? That strange weight that settles over you when someone asks you to simply be happy, to think positive, to focus on the light. Something inside you recoils. Not because you're pessimistic or broken, but because you know instinctively that what they are offering is a lie. A beautiful, seductive lie that keeps people asleep. Jung discovered this too, and it nearly destroyed him. He found that genuine psychological transformation, true shadow work, does not lead to peace or bliss, or any of the sanitized spiritual outcomes the modern world promises you. It leads to something far more disturbing. It leads to a kind of death while you are still breathing. The uncomfortable truth Jung uncovered during his own descent into the unconscious was this: shadow work is not self-improvement. It is not about becoming a better version of yourself. It is about discovering that the self you have constructed, the personality you show the world, the identity you defend so carefully, is largely a fabrication. And beneath that fabrication lives something you have spent your entire life running from. Something dark, something powerful, something that contains more of your authentic nature than anything you currently claim as yours. He called this the shadow. And he said something that still makes people uncomfortable. He said the shadow is 90% gold. Think about that. 90%. Not a little bit of hidden potential, not some small forgotten talent. 90% of your vital energy, your creativity, your power, your actual self, is locked away in the parts of you that you have disowned. But here's where it gets terrifying. The collective does not want you to reclaim that gold. Society functions on a delicate agreement that everyone will keep their shadows hidden, that everyone will maintain the persona, that everyone will stay asleep together. When you begin genuine shadow work, when you start pulling back the projections and integrating the darkness, you become dangerous. Not violent, not destructive, but dangerous in the way that anyone who wakes up in a room full of sleepers becomes dangerous. Your presence alone threatens the collective dream. Jung knew this. He watched it happen to himself and to those who dared to follow the path of individuation. The awakened do not fit anymore. They make people uncomfortable without saying a word. You need to understand the difference between what is being sold to you as shadow work and what Jung actually meant. Spiritual bypassing has infected even the psychological realm now. People journal about their anger. They acknowledge their jealousy in a workshop. They do some breath work and cry and call it shadow integration. But Jung was pointing to something infinitely more disturbing. He was talking about a descent into the unconscious that feels like madness. A confrontation with parts of yourself so alien, so rejected, so buried, that when they finally surface, you question your own sanity. This is not comfortable. This is not safe. This is why he used alchemical language, the language of death and rebirth, of Nigredo and putrefaction, of dissolving the false self in order to find the true one. The shadow has layers, and most people never get past the first one. The personal shadow is made up of the traits you learned to reject in childhood, the anger your parents could not tolerate, the sexuality that made your religious community uncomfortable, the ambition that threatened your modest family system, the sensitivity that got you bullied. These rejected parts do not disappear. They go underground. They form a kind of second personality that operates beneath your awareness, sabotaging your relationships, draining your energy, erupting in moments when your conscious control slips. You have experienced this. The disproportionate rage over something small, the attraction to people who hurt you in the same way over and over, the exhaustion that has no medical explanation. These are not random. These are symptoms of shadow possession. But beneath the personal shadow lies something older and darker, the collective shadow. This is the inherited wound, the ancestral trauma, the unprocessed darkness of your lineage. You carry patterns that do not belong to your lifetime, fears that are not yours, compulsions that echo behaviors from generations before you were born. Jung understood that the psyche is not isolated. You are connected to a vast unconscious reservoir that contains the experiences of everyone who came before you. And much of what they could not face, much of what they repressed and denied, has been passed down to you. This is why shadow work can feel like you are wrestling with something ancient, something that predates your own existence, because you are. And beneath even that, At the deepest level lies the archetypal shadow. This is the primal darkness that exists in the structure of consciousness itself, the destructive aspect of the self, the capacity for evil that lives in every human psyche. Jung called this the encounter with the absolute other, the thing inside you that is so foreign to your conscious identity that it appears almost demonic. Most people never reach this level. Most people cannot bear to look at the murderer, the predator, the destroyer that lives in the basement of their own psyche. But it is there. And until you face it, until you integrate it, you remain unconscious. You remain a puppet of forces you do not understand. For the empath, the sensitive being, the one who feels there's a specific imprint you carry that makes shadow work even more complex. You absorbed your parents' unconscious material differently than other children did. Your sensitivity meant you did not just learn behaviors. You absorbed the unspoken, the repressed, the denied aspects of your caregivers' psyches. You became a container for what they could not face in themselves. This is why you often feel like you are carrying something that is not yours, something heavy and dark that you cannot quite name. You are. You internalized their shadow material before you even had a self strong enough to defend against it. And now it lives in you, tangled up with your own rejected parts, creating a knot of darkness that feels almost impossible to untangle. There are 7 unmistakable signs that reveal shadow possession, and if you are honest with yourself, you will recognize at least some of them in your own life. The first is unexplained emotional eruptions, reactions that are completely disproportionate to the situation. Someone makes a small comment and you feel rage or devastation that makes no logical sense. This is the shadow speaking. This is a rejected part of you that has been triggered and is demanding to be seen. The second sign is obsessive projection. You see your own darkness in everyone else. You are constantly identifying the liar, the manipulator, the narcissist out there in the world, never recognizing that what you are seeing is your own disowned capacity for those same behaviors. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but most people never make that turn inward. They stay fixated on the external enemy, never realizing they are looking in a mirror. The third sign is chronic fatigue and psychosomatic illness. Repression takes enormous energy. Keeping the shadow locked away, maintaining the persona, pretending to be someone you are not, this exhausts the psyche. And eventually the body begins to break down. Mysterious pains, digestive issues, autoimmune conditions, insomnia. These are often the body's way of expressing what the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. The fourth sign is repetitive destructive patterns, especially in relationships. You keep choosing the same kind of partner. You keep ending up in the same kind of conflict. You keep sabotaging yourself in the same way. This is not bad luck. This is the shadow orchestrating situations that will force you to confront what you have been avoiding. The fifth sign appears in your dreams. Dark figures, pursuers, monsters, shadow figures that chase you or threaten you or simply watch you from the edges of the dream landscape. These are not random symbols. These are messengers from the unconscious, showing you the rejected parts of yourself that are demanding integration. The sixth sign is extreme moral rigidity, or its opposite, hidden compulsions. Some people become hyper-vigilant about morality, creating strict rules and judgments, policing themselves and others with an intensity that reveals the shadow lurking beneath. Others develop secret compulsions, hidden behaviors they are ashamed of, addictions or obsessions that contradict their public identity. Both are symptoms of a psyche split against itself. And the seventh sign, perhaps the most unsettling, is the sensation of being watched by something inside yourself. You feel observed, judged, followed by a presence that is not external but internal. This is the shadow gaining strength, becoming autonomous, developing into a second center of consciousness that operates independently of your ego. Jung called this shadow possession, and it is far more common than anyone wants to admit. Both are symptoms of a psyche split against itself. And the seventh sign, perhaps the most unsettling, is the sensation of being watched by something inside yourself. You feel observed, judged, followed by a presence that is not external but internal. This is the shadow gaining strength, becoming autonomous, developing into a second center of consciousness that operates independently of your ego. Jung called this shadow possession, and it is far more common than anyone wants to admit. Now we arrive at the threshold, the place where knowledge transforms into practice, where diagnosis becomes cure. You have seen the 7 signs. You have felt the weight of recognition settling into your bones. But recognition alone changes nothing. The shadow does not dissolve simply because you have named it. It grows stronger in the naming, unless you know the formula. The ancient alchemical process, Jung rediscovered and concealed within his therapeutic method. If one of those signs resonated with you, you are still possessed by your shadow, still working towards integration. Write, "I see my shadow," to make it real, to expose your shadow with your own enlightenment. What I am about to reveal is not metaphor. It is not poetry dressed as psychology. This is the actual mechanism by which the unconscious mind restructures itself. The occult technology Jung extracted from Gnostic texts, alchemical manuscripts, and his own terrifying descent into what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. Between 1913 and 1917, Jung nearly lost his mind. He experienced visions, heard voices, felt himself fragmenting into multiple personalities. His colleagues whispered about psychotic break. His wife watched him with growing concern. But Jung understood something they did not. He was not breaking down. He was breaking through. He was experiencing the first stage of the formula, and he was documenting every moment of it. The formula has 4 stages, and they correspond precisely to the 4 stages of alchemical transformation. This is not coincidence. The alchemists were not trying to turn lead into gold. They were encoding a psychological process so dangerous, so transformative, that it had to be hidden in chemical symbolism to protect it from those who would destroy it. Jung cracked the code. He realized the alchemists were describing the transmutation of the psyche itself, the transformation of the shadow from poison into medicine, from enemy into ally. Stage 1 is called Nigredo, the blackening. This is the stage of recognition, but recognition of a specific kind. Not intellectual recognition. Not the casual acknowledgement that yes, you have flaws. This is visceral recognition. This is the moment when you see your shadow as an actual entity, a living presence within your psyche. Jung discovered this through a practice he called active imagination. You sit in darkness, you close your eyes, you invite the shadow to appear, and you wait, not with expectation, but with terrified openness. Because when it comes, it does not come as a concept. It comes as a figure, a dark man, a witch, a demon, a monster. Whatever form your specific shadow has taken in the depths of your unconscious, that is what rises. Jung's shadow appeared to him as a figure he called Philemon, an old man with the wings of a kingfisher and the horns of a bull. Philemon spoke to Jung, taught him, argued with him. Jung wrote, "I observed clearly that it was he who spoke, not I. He said things which I had not consciously thought. I understood that there was something in me which could say things that I did not know and did not intend." This is the terror of Nigredo. You discover that you are not alone in your own mind. There is another intelligence operating within you, and it has been shaping your life from the shadows. The practical method is precise. You keep a shadow journal, but not the kind where you write about your feelings. You write dialogues. You ask the shadow direct questions. Who are you? What do you want from me? Why have you been sabotaging my relationships? And then you write the answers that come, even when they horrify you, especially when they horrify you. Because the shadow will tell you truths your ego has spent decades denying. It will say, "I want to destroy you because you abandoned me. I am the rage you never expressed. I am the sexuality you condemned. I am the ambition you called evil. I am everything you sacrificed to be acceptable. And I will have my revenge." You also track your dreams with obsessive detail. Every dark figure, every pursuer, every monster. These are not random symbols. They are your shadow showing you its faces, giving you a map of what has been repressed. And you perform projection withdrawal. This is the most brutal part. You make a list of everyone you hate, everyone who triggers disproportionate disgust or rage in you. Then you ask the unbearable question, what quality in them am I refusing to see in myself? The person who disgusts you with their neediness is showing you your own disowned dependency. The person who enrages you with their arrogance is reflecting your own suppressed superiority. This is why shadow work feels like death, because you must admit that everything you hate in the world is living inside you. Stage 2 is Albedo, the Whitening. This is confrontation, but not the confrontation of battle. This is the confrontation of sitting. You sit with the disowned trait without trying to fix it, change it, or spiritualize it away. You simply hold it in consciousness. Jung used a principle he took directly from alchemy: solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine. You must first dissolve your identification with the ego, your belief that you are only the conscious personality you present to the world. You dissolve the rigid boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable, good and bad, light and dark. This dissolution is terrifying because it feels like madness. Your sense of self becomes fluid, unstable, multiple. Jung created what he called a Temenos, a sacred container for this work. He built a stone tower at Blackening, a place where he could perform his private rituals without the judgment of the collective. He carved stones, he painted mandalas. He engaged in practices that looked insane to the outside world but were absolutely necessary for the inner work. The Temenos is not optional. You cannot do shadow work in the middle of your normal life, surrounded by people who need you to remain the person you have always been. You must create a protected space, physical or temporal, where you can allow the dissolution to occur. The ritual practices are specific. Mandala drawing is not art therapy. It is a method of externalizing the psychic chaos, giving form to the formless, creating order from disorder. You draw a circle, you fill it with whatever images arise from the unconscious. You do not plan it, you do not make it beautiful. You let the shadow express itself through color and shape. Jung drew hundreds of mandalas during his confrontation with the unconscious, and he noticed something extraordinary. As the inner chaos began to organize itself, the mandalas became more symmetrical, more balanced. The psyche was restructuring itself through the act of symbolic representation. Stage 3 is Citrinitas, the yellowing, the dawn. This is integration, the conscious assimilation of shadow qualities. But here is the paradox Jung discovered. You do not integrate the shadow by becoming it. You integrate it by holding both the light and the dark in consciousness simultaneously. You become more yourself by accepting what is not you, what you thought was not you. The rejected traits do not disappear, they transform. The repressed rage becomes fierce boundary setting. The condemned sexuality becomes creative life force. The hidden arrogance becomes justified confidence. This is what Jung meant when he said the shadow is 90% gold. The very qualities you exiled contain the energy, the vitality, the power you need to become whole. But there is a price. The integrated individual becomes dangerous to the collective, because you are no longer controllable. You are no longer performing the role society assigned you. You have reclaimed the parts of yourself that civilization demanded you sacrifice, and now you walk through the world with a presence that makes people uncomfortable. They cannot name what has changed, but they feel it. You have become authentic in a world that runs on pretense, and authenticity is always perceived as a threat. Stage 4 is Rubedo, the Reddening. This is transformation, the birth of the individuated self. Jung called this the union of opposites, the sacred marriage of conscious and unconscious, light and dark, masculine and feminine. You are no longer split. You are no longer at war with yourself. The shadow has not been destroyed. It has been married to consciousness, and from that union, a new self is born. This self is whole, but it is not perfect. It is real, but it is not comfortable. It contains everything, the saint and the sinner, the hero and the coward, the creator and the destroyer. Jung warned that the individuated life is not easier, only more real. You will lose friends. You will lose opportunities. You will be misunderstood, pathologized, feared. Because the collective does not want whole individuals. It wants fragments it can control, roles it can predict, shadows it can project onto. When you refuse to carry the collective shadow any longer, when you withdraw your projections and stand in your own darkness, you become an exile. Not from geography, but from the collective unconscious itself. You are awake in a sleeping world, and that is the loneliest position a human being can occupy. The practical protocol is lifelong. Daily, you keep the shadow journal, asking the questions that prevent re-repression. Weekly, you practice active imagination, maintaining the dialogue with the unconscious. Monthly, you perform projection inventory, checking where you are still externalizing your darkness onto others. And you watch for the warning signs that the work has gone too far without guidance. If you begin to lose the ability to function, if you cannot distinguish between inner and outer reality, if the shadow threatens to overwhelm consciousness entirely, you need a guide, someone who has made the descent and returned. This is the occult formula. This is what Jung discovered, and what he knew most people would never have the courage to attempt. Because shadow work is not self-improvement, it is self-annihilation, followed by self-reconstruction. And most people would rather remain fragmented and miserable than risk the terror of becoming whole.